Welcome, everyone, to our deep dive into one of history's most turbulent eras, the decline of a once mighty empire. Picture this: an empire rich in history, yet weighed down by centuries of accumulated power, ultimately dubbed the sick man of Europe.
Nickname. Absolutely. It's like when an old friend starts showing cracks after years of neglect. So what's the core of this empire's struggles?
Well, the Ottoman Empire's problems were multi-layered. First off, their economy was limping along. European powers had been meddling for decades, granting themselves these so-called capitulations that drained resources and eroded sovereignty. And that legal immunity practically made them a cash cow for Europe.
Right. And you can imagine how those financial strains, compounded by repeated military defeats, really bruised the empire's confidence.
Exactly. It's like the empire was under constant pressure from outside influences while trying to modernize at the same time. And speaking of external pressures, the so-called Eastern Question is central here. European powers like Russia, Austria-Hungary, and Britain were all scrambling, each with their own strategic interests, whether it was naval access, territorial expansion, or simply keeping competitors at bay.
Yeah, definitely a tangled geopolitical web. So, while the empire was internally struggling with a limping economy and military setbacks, it had these external vultures circling around. Tough situation indeed.
Absolutely. And internally, the Ottomans did try to reverse the decline. They launched the Tanzimat reforms, efforts aimed at modernizing the military, administrative systems, and even the economy, all while trying to promote equality among the diverse peoples under Ottoman rule, to foster an overarching Ottoman identity, if you will.
That sounds promising, but didn't those reforms run into issues with rising nationalism?
Spot on. As European revolutionary ideas spread, nationalist movements began germinating among subjects like the Greeks, Serbs, and Bulgarians. What was meant to unify became more a sort of ideal that hardly translated into reality. The reforms were a bit like patching up a crumbling wall. Every patch revealed wider cracks underneath.
Yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Exactly, and that's where the Young Turks come in, right? They raised hope for modernization, but ended up deepening internal divisions.
True. In 1908, those reformists, known as the Young Turks, seized power, riding a wave of modernization enthusiasm. But ironically, their agenda magnetized even stronger nationalist sentiments, especially Turkish nationalism, which clashed with the aspirations of other ethnic groups. It's like every step they took to unify ended up carving even deeper fault lines in an already fractured society.
I can see that. Unintentional side effects, really. Although, don't you think it might be a bit oversimplified to lay all the blame for deepening divisions solely on the Young Turks?
I hear you. And that's a fair point. While the Young Turks certainly accelerated certain divisions, the roots of fragmentation had been growing for a long time, fueled by external interference and long-standing internal conflicts.
Exactly. Moving to the Balkans then, a hotspot where these nationalist fires blazed, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed. The Balkans were a rugged, mountainous mix of cultures under Ottoman control, where nationalist ideas exploded into full-scale uprisings. Think of it as a region where the Ottoman hold was gradually unraveling, with movements like the Greek War of Independence chipping away at its European core.
Indeed, it was like watching a tapestry being torn apart, thread by thread. And then came the Balkan Wars, a true powder keg moment. The Balkan League, formed by Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, and Montenegro, united to drive the Ottomans out of Europe. What a dramatic shift that must have been.
Absolutely. In 1912, the Balkan League struck with remarkable unity and ferocity. Ottoman forces were overwhelmed in battles like the one at Kumanovo, and key territories like Macedonia and Thessaloniki fell one after the other.
Right, and I remember that at one point The Ottomans were pushed so close to Istanbul that it must have been terrifying. Indeed, fighting near their heartland like Satalka was the empire's desperate last stand in Europe.
Exactly. And that loss of nearly all European territories wasn't just a strategic defeat. It was almost like losing part of their historical identity. Then came the Second Balkan War, where Bulgaria, feeling aggrieved over the spoils, even turned on its former allies, further complicating the region.
That must have been a bitter pill for everyone involved. With tensions rising internally and externally, the empire was hardly in a position to imagine recovery. So, how did they try to cope once World War I loomed on the horizon?
Great question. With the scars of the Balkan Wars still fresh, the Ottoman leadership turned to Germany as a glimmer of hope. Germany, with its promise of military expertise and a chance to reverse humiliations like the capitulations, became the empire's strategic savior, or so it seemed.
That alignment was definitely a calculated gamble. And Enver Pasha, the charismatic Minister of War, was absolutely enthralled by Germany's prowess. It was a bold move to join the Central Powers in hopes of regaining lost territories, especially against Russia.
True, but it turned out to be a double-edged sword. In late 1914, under German influence, the Ottomans launched a surprise attack on Russian ports in the Black Sea, a move that quickly dragged them into World War I.
Yes, and that essentially opened up a front in every direction, exactly. From the Caucasus to Mesopotamia, Sinai, and not to forget the Dardanelles, the empire was fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously.
Right on. And among all these battles, Gallipoli stands out as an iconic moment of defiance. There, a young officer named Mustafa Kemal, later known worldwide as Ataturk, emerged as a national hero. His leadership in rallying the troops at Anzac Cove turned the tide, albeit momentarily, and showcased the empire's capacity for valor, even in its darkest hours.
It's remarkable how one moment can symbolize an entire nation's resilience. And then there's the touching, personal story of that family heirloom, a hand-woven belt passed down to Mustafa Kemal. It wasn't just a keepsake. It embodied the spirit and endurance of a nation in decline, yet on the cusp of rebirth.
Exactly. That belt became a sort of talisman, a reminder of the strength drawn from history and the pool of resilience that would eventually pave the way for the birth of modern Turkey.
True. It's almost poetic how personal symbolism can capture the sweeping changes of history. Yet while Gallipoli and such heroic moments energized the public, the larger picture was grim. The home front was ravaged by famine, disease, and ethnic conflict, with the horrific Armenian genocide underscoring the brutal cost of war.
Unfortunately, yes. The stress of prolonged war bled the empire dry. By 1918, facing defeat on multiple fronts, internal strife, and isolation after Bulgaria's collapse, the Ottoman Empire was essentially done for.
The armistice of Mudros in 1918 marked the end of its sovereignty, a demilitarized army, key territories under Allied control, and even an occupation of Istanbul.
Yeah. It's staggering how an empire that once spanned continents fell apart so swiftly. And yet, out of that collapse, a new chapter began. The birth of the Republic of Turkey.
Turning decline into a foundation for modern statehood is really something to marvel at. But I have to challenge one point here. Some argue that modern Turkey is seen more as a sharp break from Ottoman tradition, rather than a smooth transformation. What do you make of that?
That's a great observation. While Ataturk's reforms did represent a radical shift, in many ways they were an evolution of the empire's long history. The Ottoman legacy, its diverse cultures, administrative innovations, and even its failures, laid the groundwork for the intense drive to modernize. So, while the break appears stark, the continuity of historical experience is undeniable.
I see what you mean. It's like history, always messy and full of contradictions. The same forces that caused the empire's decline eventually gave birth to a modern nation with its own identity.
Absolutely. And speaking of contradictions, The Tanzimat and Young Turks reforms, intended to unify, ironically deepened divisions, while foreign interventions both crippled and inadvertently spurred internal reform. It's like patching a crumbling foundation and realizing that each patch reveals more cracks.
Yeah, it's a fascinating paradox. So, in essence, the Ottoman decline and subsequent transformations are a study in how endings can lead to new beginnings, even if the transition is deeply painful.
Exactly. It's a story of resilience, failure, and rebirth. The empires fall under the weight of external pressures and internal strife, and the subsequent emergence of modern Turkey is a reminder of history's cyclical nature.
Truly a cycle of decay and renewal. And it reminds us that historical transitions aren't neat. They're messy, full of personal sacrifices, political gambles, and, well, the unpredictable nature of human ambition.
Precisely. From economic decline, military defeats, and nationalist upheavals, to heroic defenses at Gallipoli and the transformative reforms that followed, the downfall of the Ottoman Empire was as complex as it was inevitable.
Yeah, it's like every thread in the tapestry of history played its part. What a journey through time. From the empire's soaring days, through its painful decline, labeled by the world as the sick man of Europe, to its final collapse and the birth of a new identity. This era teaches us so much about resilience and transformation.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure tracing these historical contours and realizing how, even in decay, there are seeds of renewal waiting to
Indeed.
sprout.
Thanks for this engaging exploration. It really makes you reflect on how history, in all its messy imperfection, never really dies. It just transforms into something new.
Exactly. And until next time, keep pondering the intricate dance of decline and rebirth that shapes our world.
Yep. Take care, everyone, and remember, the past might be gone, but its lessons echo into our future.
Thanks for joining this journey today. We'll catch up again soon.